something simple gets missed, and like, well, I'm sure we talked about this, and all of a sudden, the results aren't happening. So that's when you kind of know that, okay, is there an imposter syndrome happening?
Yeah. So tell me about imposter VA. What the hell is an imposter VA?
This is fascinating. I didn't actually know this term until my VAs told me about it. Essentially, you hire somebody, whether it could be through an agency, it could be direct, but the person doing the work is actually not the person you think. If it's an agency, sometimes you talk to one of their more articulate, well-spoken agents, and then they pass it down to some very junior level people to do the actual work. That way, they pay a higher salary to one person who's kind of the front, and lower salaries to people who are kind of junior level people coming in at a much lower price. When you hire someone direct, again, same thing, right? It could be a well-spoken VA, and then they've got their cousins and friends and stuff actually doing the work. So again, if the results are there, not a big issue, but it's usually when things start to go wrong that we have to kind of worry.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Like oftentimes when I'm hiring VAs, I'm noticing there's a bit of there's lots of miscommunication, and that miscommunication is causing them to execute on the tasks in a poor way. Like they just make lots of mistakes, and then I oversee the chat, because most of the time it's either emails or chat, and I was like, how can you possibly misunderstand this, right? And you told me that you understand that you have to do this, and this, but it makes sense if there's another person, or maybe even more than one person is in that chain, because then it's this broken phone effect where I say something to person A, transfers what they think I said to person B, but by then there's a big chunk of that, it just gets
things get missed, right? There's a dilution of the message, and you start seeing signs, like you just said, like something simple gets missed, and like, well, I'm sure we talked about this, and all of a sudden, the results aren't happening. So that's when you kind of know that, okay, is there an imposter syndrome happening?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And they don't tell you either, right? But sometimes, the other day, what happened with me, like I brought someone in to help out with the podcast, and eventually they brought in a team member that was actually executing on the tasks, and they connected us directly to the team member. And actually, the team member ended up, asking us to hire them directly.
Yep.
Instead of going through that agency. And I understand that, because these people don't get paid a whole lot of money, and with the little money that we do pay for VAs these days, even that gets probably cut in half by the time they're getting paid.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point, and I kind of discovered this working, in an agency for about a decade, Igor, which was, nowadays when I ask people, hey, when you hire a VA, really try and find out how much is the person who's actually doing the work actually going to be getting. So quite often, if you're going through an agency, maybe if you're paying $5 to an agency, again, they're probably making at least, kind of double the money. So they're probably paying $2.50 to a VA. Now, the challenge is that's really not enough, right? So people brag about, I hired a VA for $2. Really? Did you really hire a good VA for $2? Or did you hire someone desperate enough to basically take that position? And so when people say I had a challenge, it's because often they're underpaying. When you're paying about $10, to $12 per hour, the agency is still maybe paying, $2 to $5 to the VA, which means that they're making a huge markup per hour. Now, one of the things that we do a little bit differently is that we basically make very transparent. So our clients actually pay our VAs directly. So that's one of the things I kind of took away, because what happens is clients don't feel like they're being, overcharged. And VAs, really important here, the VAs don't feel like we're taking money out of their pocket. It's a very different way of approaching it.
Yeah. Yeah, the markup is crazy.
Yo, it's Igor. I want you to have my Amazon best-selling book for free for taking the time to listen to my podcast and to watch my YouTube videos. Now, I'm not only going to give you this book for free, but I'm going to throw in about $3.2 thousand in free bonuses. Now, if you want to get this book, please click the link in the description, or you can also go to igorsbook.com. And now, back to the podcast.
Is there any kind of regulatory body that protects me, or is it just free for all? And
So the Philippines take it very seriously, right? They I mean, there are stipulations in place that, hey, if you're working through an agency, you don't attempt to circumvent the agency, because it is a huge part of their economy. I mean, a massive part of the economy. So they do rely on foreign businesses to hire Filipinos and work with agencies. So circumvention is kind of a serious thing. However, it's very hard to enforce. I mean, it doesn't make how much time and effort are we going to spend really, you know, trying to kind of create a lawsuit or something for somebody who's in the Philippines making a few $100 per month. It's not worth our time, right? It's better that we do our work up front and do our best to hire the right person. Again, I'm not saying that no matter, how much due diligence you do, there's still a little bit of kind of luck involved at the end of the day, right? You do your, you check their the credentials, you check their resumes, you even get other clients to kind of give you some feedback as well. But you never know if it's all staged or set up. So at the end of the day, you can do all that stuff, but you kind of got to really test it out.
yeah, I understand that. Do you ever hire VAs that aren't in the Philippines? Like, do you hire them in the US?
Yeah, not in the US. Well, here's what I do in the US is I try and, if there's things that, like, okay, here's an example. Someone wanted an editor. And so I went to some high school kids who are, doing journalism or English, and said, hey, look, I've got someone who they need editing. They're writing the documents, but they need someone to kind of look at the grammar and stuff. So they're actually great, right? I mean, that way you're also kind of giving, teens and youngsters kind of a start to earn some extra money and stuff as well. I was in those cases, yes, I do. So the US, South Africa, can be a great place to look for some types of, skilled labor.
Wow, that's brilliant. That's really smart. You're still hiring in the US, but you're getting cheap workforce. A couple of years ago, actually many years ago, I used to have a friend. His name was Gonzalo, and he used to be an expert at outsourcing. Like, he didn't have an agency or anything, but he was just so proficient and efficient at outsourcing everything and anything. Like, he wrote a bunch of books that he never touched on topics he had no business writing about, including, by the way, one book about how to get your wife to agree to have sex with other women, and he sent me the book. It was smart. The first thing you need to do is you first need to convince, your wife that it's okay to be, to be experimenting with another woman without you. And then, they'll bring you in. Basically, that was the technique. No, but so this guy he never saw what I really admired in him. And I had him mentor me for some time. He never really, there was nothing unsolvable for him, but outsourcing was his business. He could get into anyone's life and he could really outsource and systematize anything you want. And so one time he shared the strategy with me that he was hiring specifically. He would always be hiring Mormon stay-at-home moms, because he said that they've got like 6 hours to work every day or so. They usually do it in the morning, and most of them have great education and great work ethic, but they're not really ambitious enough to go and steal your customers or whatnot. So he's like, this is like the best types of VAs I've ever hired. It's not expensive. They're really smart. They're really hardworking. Some of them have MBAs, but they're amazing. And recently, I was having a conversation with my buddy Mike Martin, who kind of told me the same thing, where he would hire mothers in proximity to his office, usually with some sort of higher education, who ended up settling down, having kids, and can't really commit to a career in the same way that, say, a guy can, or a woman that doesn't have any kids can.
Yeah, if you're flexible with times and location and stuff, there's a lot of skilled labor, in your domestic countries, right? Here in the US and Canada, in the UK, and people looking for work, right? As you said, sometimes life circumstances, you have a kid, that they're going to be sleeping 2-3 hours a day. People want to kind of fill their time in, and not everybody wants to sit there and watch Netflix. So, don't just assume that you've got to go overseas for cheap labor. There's a lot of skilled labor and people who are hungry for work, depending on the type of work.